Hello, New Prospect. Welcome to RTB 2021 for February 20th, 2021. Got a number of great texts for us today. Hope you're doing well this day. So we got for text for today, 1 Corinthians 7, Job 20, Luke 6, and Exodus 3. So let's start with the other end of the canon today in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So in this text, Paul is addressing some issues that the Corinthian church had apparently written and questioned him about. This is in chapter 7 and in chapter 8, I believe. In verse 1, it says, now concerning the things about which you wrote. So he's addressing a number of issues here, particularly dealing with marriage and relationships. So for instance, he begins by saying, it's good concerning things that you wrote to me. It's good for a man not to touch a woman. In this case, he's probably talking about the fact that it is, there were some perhaps who were advocating celibacy or something like that within marriage, and he argues against it. In fact, he argues that the physical relationship between a husband and wife is actually a protection against immoralities in verse 2. Then he speaks of his own singleness and talks to those who are unmarried, and says that he hopes that they can remain even as he is, and yet and so that they can then work for the kingdom even as he does, and yet he says is if they do not have self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Favorite verse of some seminarians that I used to know at Southern. Then he gives some instructions on marriage. He talks about one of the things I think there was a problem in that early church is that you would have unequally yoked partners, right? When you would have a husband and wife who were married, and then one of them became a believer. Well, what happens then? Well, Paul gives instruction that they are to not divorce with the hope of ultimately converting that other partner. Verse 14, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by her believing husband. So that's 1 Corinthians. Let's move on to Job. So Job 20, we have the second speech of Zophar, where it's kind of recapping a lot of what happened before with the other speeches by Eliphaz and Bildad. We see similar speeches where he's arguing that wickedness will not profit, and there will be a judgment against the wicked and these types of things. Here, of course, the implication is that Job has been wicked, and we've talked about that before. Again, some of what they say, Zophar and Bildad and Eliphaz, is orthodox, but again, it's very poorly applied theology, and it's not rightly understood theology, I think, ultimately. Then we bring us to, let's go to Luke. And so Luke, we have here a number of teachings on the part of Jesus. And right at the center of all of it is what we know is the Sermon on the Plain. So in verse 17, he came down with them and stood on the level place. So you find some similarities between this sermon that Jesus preached and the Sermon on the Mount. Of course, Jesus probably preached some of the same sermons and the same types of messages in different locations to different people, always traveling in that way. And so it could be, it's just the same content in a different area. And so if you remember, last year, preached a long time on the teachings of Jesus, and so we hit on a lot of these. But I'm always drawn to the Beatitudes of Jesus, where he talks about blessed are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hungry, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Remember what that term blessed means. It means to be in right relationship with God. It's not happy. It's not talking about emotion. It's talking about it being in right covenant relationship with God. And ultimately, it's the characteristics of the people who are in covenant relationship with God. And what are the characteristics? What should define us to the world around us? It's things like being even though we are weeping and are poor, we are satisfied with God. And we are those who will be hated and reviled, and yet we will bless God for the opportunity to suffer for him. Those are the defining characteristics of the people of God. By the way, you also see some of these big themes of the book of Luke and his gospel. He's very much focused in on things like prayer, the Spirit. We've seen those already. But we also see these themes of the outcasts, those who are outcasts in society, the poor, the sick, the infirm, elderly, and these types and women even. These types are take a prominent role in Jesus's ministry, as discussed by the Gospel of Luke. In fact, who are the very first people who hear the message of Jesus's birth, but the outcast shepherds? And so we see that very prominent theme. And that leaves us with Exodus chapter 3. And I want us to just consider this call of Moses, this famous burning bush passage. And I think this is really instructive for a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that here in the burning bush, we really get the chance to see who Moses was. Now, we often think of Moses, Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments, right? This great deliverer, strong and mighty warrior type. That's not his main role. He was a deliverer, but really God is the deliverer in the book of Exodus. And as you read through the book of Exodus, that brings up another point. As you read through the book of Exodus, the main character, the hero of this text is not Moses, even though movies portray it in that way. The main hero, the main figure in this text is God. We need to stop reading the text in a self-centered way, but in a God-centered way. And that changes the way not only you read the Bible, but the way you read, the way you interpret all your experiences in life. You start to see your life from a God-centered perspective and not from a human-centered perspective. But here at the burning bush, we see what God is calling Moses specifically to do. So Moses sees a theophany, a picture of God, a vision of God in the burning bush. God gives him a commission. God tells him to go and speak a word to the Pharaoh. And Moses then says, I can't do it. He expresses reticence. God gives him a confirming sign or two. And then Moses agrees to go do it. Well, this is a pattern in stories that we find in the Old Testament, particularly with prophets. So you think about Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah even. They are given a commission by God, often in the form of a theophany where God reveals himself in some physical manifestation. Given a commission, they say, no, I can't do it. Then God gives them a confirming sign, and then they go and do it. So Moses, what's his role? He's a prophet. And what does a prophet do? He communicates the word from God in order to bring people into closer conformity with in covenant relationship with God. So Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all those prophets are right in line with Moses and what they're trying to do. And Moses is, in this case, forming through his words. He's giving the constitution for this covenant people of God. But I think that's an instructive thing to think about as well. But all that to say, these are some great texts, and I hope it's been instructive for you, and encouraging for you on this day, February 20th, 2021. Hope you have a great rest of the day.